Okay, it's just after 1:30, members of council, and going back to our in-camera meeting that we just held. May I have a motion, please, to transmit the recommendations? Moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, and that's carried. Item number one item number 1 and 2, that administration follow the verbal direction of council with respect to property matters, both sales of land. Moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, that's carried. Item number 3 was a personnel matter about identifiable individuals. Administration followed the verbal direction of council. So moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, that's carried. Item number 4 was a verbal update on a public report that's on the agenda related to the Isolation and Recovery Center. And we just received for information, please. Moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, that's carried. Item number 5 was a personnel matter about a recruitment. So moved, supported. All in favor, opposed, and that carries. And members of the public, council did waive the rules to add an item, which was an in-camera discussion about the recent event. Moved, supported. All in favor, opposed, that's carried. And motion to adjourn the in-camera meeting, please. Moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. Now moving to the public agenda. Call the public meeting to order. And as we start, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. The City of Windsor honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest on this agenda? None noted. Takes us to the minutes. They have been moved by Councillors Geniac and Gill. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Notices of proclamations. Members of council, Tuesday, February 22nd is International Mother Language Day. Moving in the committee of the whole, moved by Councillors Holt and Kashak. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Communications. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Costante.
Thank you, Worship. A couple questions on item 7.1.3, the letter that we received from Brian Massey. And in it, he raises a couple of interesting points, particularly around our capacities to move freight across the border, and mentions one in particular that has me thinking about the truck ferry service that we have in the region. And I wondered to what extent, if there's someone here today from our own administration that has any awareness to whether or not there are any protocols in place with the truck ferry and any border operations to sort of address issues there when there are border issues similar to what we've seen, or some sort of emergency scenario where that sort of triggers a certain response that allows for the utilization of the truck ferry to help to further facilitate international freight to go get across the border.
Your Worship, members of council, it's a great question, Councillor McKenzie, and I know that it was explored, and part of the EOC discussions that were going on with police and the broader administration that was involved with trying to figure out how to manage this. My understanding is that the largest challenge with that is just the capacity. I think it's for big trucks, transport trucks. So when we're talking about the volume of traffic we need, but moving forward, I think all of these kinds of options that can help us react in real time, to manage the situation and ease some of the pressure and keep goods moving, we'll be looking at. So great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for that, Jason. I guess one of the things that I think would be maybe an interesting way to prioritize, and it was offered as a comment, and I'm not sure if there's a motion here, but understanding the capacities, and I've seen that operation, it certainly doesn't, it couldn't accommodate, or is not a replacement for the Ambassador Bridge. I understand that quite well, but if we were looking to perhaps, even from our own perspective in the city, playing a role in terms of prioritizing looking at different ways where we might enter into that discussion in terms of being able to prioritize certain types of freight. And I know that there would be a number of different stakeholders that would be involved in those discussions, from the industry, from federal government, the service provider as well. But I think that there's a role for us to play in terms of having that discussion, even if it was ensuring local truckers, for example, had priority to get across the border, or perhaps it was some of the industries that are most key to our region had that we're sort of within a prioritized scope that would be sort of how you assemble the queue, or how you prioritize who's going to have access to that service. So I'll leave that as a comment, but I appreciate that those discussions have already taken place. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Costante.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a few questions on matter 7.2 and a proposed motion. I'm going to defer to Your Worship if we should address this now, or should I pull it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Questions to administration. The first being, I understand that in the past recent months, there's been an internal shift in resources with respect to enforcement of complaints that we receive. If Ms. Askenhager or anyone from administration could give us a high level of what that shift looks like, and moving forward, what it's going to look like.
I can begin. Mr. Robertson and Mr. Vlachodimos are both here as well. We would like to focus. I mean, certainly enforcement is the title of the unit, but we need to focus as well on compliance. We've been looking at models also within the city and in other municipalities, and making sure that people comply with the bylaw, as opposed to simply looking for violators. Taking a more proactive stance around compliance as well as enforcement is really important. And so I think this question gave us an opportunity to explore the way we could do that to be more effective, because obviously the complaints that have come in and the issues that have been raised indicate that we had some work to do in that area.
Thanks, Shelby. And I don't think Steve or Craig have anything to add to that. Okay. So I guess from an enforcement perspective and compliance, I suppose, the crux of the issue oftentimes is what happens when, you file a complaint with 311 and your neighbor is the issue. The rats are coming from the abutting property and they're not willing to do anything about it. If you could kind of walk us through what enforcement could look like in that regard.
Sure, I can start, and I think Mr. Robertson would probably have some better details about it than I would. But at a high level, what we would do is we'd first obviously attend at the property. We would also talk to the neighbor who complained, because if rats are appearing on that neighbor's property, there's probably opportunities to help them as well. At least with, for example, with education and so on. Even if the neighbor keeps an impeccable property, if he or she isn't keeping sealed garbage or something along those lines, then that would be something we could advise them on. But then we would take a look at the property in question. You can see by the report that we have a number of tools that already exist. The initial question was whether we should do a bylaw against forbidding people from having rats on their property. But when we did the review, we realized that we do have all of these various pieces exist in other bylaws already, and it's just a matter of marshaling them and using the tools properly. So what we would do is we'd attend at the property first and take a look at what's there. We would speak to the property owner, the property occupant, and we would give them a notice to comply and say, these are the things you need to do. Now, there's various different things that lead to rats. It could be, we could see there's a burrow on the property and you need to deal with that. Or you've got garbage, or you've got open food. There would be a number of things we'd say you need to deal with that. Here's how you contact our if rat baiting is one of those things that needs to happen, we would say, here's how you contact our program, or you can contact someone on your own. If you don't deal with this quickly, as we always do, we give them the opportunity to clean up your garbage or whatever. We'll come back and we'll take steps ourselves, and those steps will cost you money. So depending on what the steps are that need to be taken, we can go in there and we can do a lot of them. Actually baiting a rat burrow without the property owner's consent is not something we could do. But when faced with the option of either doing it themselves or getting involved in our program themselves, or having us take steps which could and would likely be a lot more expensive while at the same time prosecuting them, it would be it would probably be, it would be difficult to imagine who would not opt to go down that road, but we would do what we had to do. Following up with the fact that we can't bait a burrow without somebody's consent, we can't place poison on their property without their consent. There are other methods that are not necessarily as effective. There's live traps, there's snap traps, there's different kinds of deterrents that can be placed. It's a lot more expensive for them to have to pay for that, and they would have to pay for that. I don't know if Craig, if you have anything you want to add to that discussion, or if that about covered it from your perspective.
Yes, thanks, Shelby. I think you covered it for the most part there. Again, Councillor, I'm not going to repeat what Ms. Askenhager has already said, but I think there's an opportunity here that after we do the yard cleanup, to actively look to see, is there some burrows still on the property? We could look at filling in inactive burrows. Maybe there's an opportunity to place traps and go further and work with the property owner as well as a complainant if they're seeing rats on their property, so that we can look at ways of getting rid of that. Our dirty yard bylaw does allow us to take any type of measures to correct the deficiency. So we've seen that in some cases when we've done dirty yards, we've had to actually remove fences, cut locks, hire dump trucks. So we can take any measure that we want. So I think that we can easily apply this when it comes to rats, even if we don't see burrows. But like Ms. Askenhager has said, the idea here will be to work with property owners to encourage them to go with the free program. If not, we do have the ability to go at that higher cost. And also we are looking at specifically tracking these complaints where burrows are at so that we can have a better idea of what the issues are and where these problems areas are located at within the city.
Thanks, Craig. Your worship, I see you unmuted. Did you want to jump in, or are you?
No, I thought a lot of this, I thought a lot of this would have been worked out already. So if this is going to take a lot longer, I'll just move it to a regular business item.
It won't. I just got one more question, your worship, and then I'll leave it to my colleagues if they have questions, because then I have a proposed motion. The last question was on the last piece that Mr. Robinson mentioned with respect to tracking data. And so I guess in this process, we've discovered that we're not tracking data on rat complaints, I guess, as detailed as we would like to moving forward. And if administration could just walk us through, how we intend to do that moving forward.
Your worship, members of council, we've instituted an actual rat complaint. We previously didn't have that. It often fell under dirty yard, which is why it was difficult to really determine what the statistics were around rat complaints, because it just came under, a dirty yard. So we've created a new, I don't know what it's called, a new subcategory that will track those things, and then we'll be able to use that to see how effective our programs become.
Okay, thank you. Your worship, I'll wait for my colleagues to ask questions on it, then I have a proposed motion.
Go ahead with your motion, Councillor.
Okay, it's to receive the report and to further direct administration. Okay.
Are there more questions on this?
I have one question.
Let's pull it off, because I've got the police chief here and I've got to get her out.
It's one question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Do you need our direction to undertake the education portion that was included?
I don't know that we need it, because it falls within our ability, but we'd be certainly happy to have it.
Well, then I hope that's part of your motion, Fabio.
We were planning on undertaking it in any event.
Councillor Borland, question on this?
Just a quick one. If there are gaps in the bylaw, for example, I remember if it was fruit trees did not constitute a dirty yard, but were causing issues, will things like that be brought forward to us to at least potentially amend the dirty yard bylaw or something like that?
If we find something to that effect, but you can't have any conditions that attract vermin. So even though fruit trees are fruit trees, if you're not cleaning up the groundfall, then you have a problem.
Councillor Costante.
Thank you, Your Worship. My motion is to receive the report and to direct administration to report back at a future date on the data collected and potential strategies to target the issue of rodents in our community, and further to direct administration to initiate an education and awareness campaign so residents are more aware of the existing city program.
Great. Moved, supported, all in favor, opposed, and that's carried. Councillor Costant, anything else on communications?
No, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bordelin, did you have something else on communications? Thank you. Councillor Kashak.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everybody. On communications item 7.1.2, certainly nice to see Mr. Hunt involved here in this delegating certain planning decisions to staff to reduce the red tape. Mr. Hunt, if you could just maybe give us a brief update, and where is Bill 70 at? I know that level of government was prorogated, so I just don't know if this bill is coming back, or is it going to have to start over new?
So thank you, Councillor, for your question. Just to update, the thrust of the letter that was prepared on behalf of the Regional Planning Commissioners of Ontario was about Bill 13. So Bill 13 did get approved, and a lot of what Bill 13 asked for from RPCO standpoint didn't get included in this round of changes, but there were some delegations of authority style changes that were made, specifically to areas of minor variance and consents that may, in fact, really speed things up. So from our perspective, that saves an applicant approximately about 60 days. We need to put those policies in our official plan to make them effective, but we will be doing that and are in the works right now. So that's the positive message on that. It continues to be a work in progress, and certainly with the recent housing affordability task force report that's come out, the province is looking at further changes, and we're engaged with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing specifically on those topics as well. So we expect there to be a lot of streamlining of development approval processes coming out of the province, and anything that we can assist in that regard from speeding things along from a legislative requirement standpoint. It's much easier if some of those approvals can be delegated to staff than have to go through formal public meetings. A lot of times they tend to be routine matters that can easily be handled with administration in a lot more timely way. Bill 70, Councillor, is actually a private member's bill in reference to the provincial recognition of professional planners, somewhat related, but not part of the delegation approvals process.
Yeah, that's a good explanation, Mr. Hunt, and I appreciate that. And I know it's been a hot topic. The mayor's been involved in this at the provincial level as well. And certainly, like you mentioned, saving 60 days for some applicants moving forward is great news. So appreciate the update, and I hope to see it all come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. On communications? Communications is moved by Councillors McKenzie and Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Members of council, with your indulgence, I'm going to just bring the police chief in before we go through the consent, because she's extremely busy today, still dealing with the active, so is my dog, very busy today, dealing with the active situation on the ground. And so I need a waiver of the rules, please, 2/3 to add this item, please. Moved and supported. All in favor, opposed, and that's carried. And before I turn it over to the chief, I'll just let members of council know that a short while ago, I did sign an emergency declaration related to this event. And I know members of the public and media and perhaps others will wonder why we didn't do this right out of the gate. The reality is the powers that are conferred in the emergency declaration actually allow us, wouldn't have provided any benefit up front. They actually allow us to get things done now that the event is over, to be able to deal with rerouting transit lines and all of the operational things from a city perspective that we will now have to deal with, and will allow us to deal in real time should something happen in the very near future that we're all hoping doesn't happen with respect to a repeat of what we saw in the last 7 days. So I just wanted you to know that, and I will turn the floor over to Chief Mizuno to provide us an update about this ongoing security issue. Chief?
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, everyone. First off, I just want to start by thanking you, City Council, for your support. All of you recognized how critical it is for everyone to work together and have one voice to resolve the situation that was happening in our city. So with the support of all levels of government, several police agencies, other law enforcement, and community partners in the community itself, I am happy, as you all know, to report here on Church Road and the Ambassador Bridge are now open. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is involved in making that happen. We had some critical support from the City of Windsor, and the outcome achieved yesterday would not have been possible without the hard work, professionalism, and dedication of all police personnel, Windsor Police members, and our policing partners, and the hard work and support of all our other partners and the community. The outcome was relatively peaceful without any significant injuries. Police officers made several arrests, issued tickets, and towed some involved vehicles. Currently, there is a traffic strategy in place that does include traffic interruptions that are based on a buffer zone that we created as a sustainable but temporary solution. That, of course, was not an easy decision, as we understand the impact the strategy has on our community. However, we have to balance that with the risks of further protests. And I would just like to ask Deputy Chief Jason Bellaire to just provide some further details on what the traffic situation looks like on here on Church Road right now. Well, not hearing from Deputy Chief Bellaire, I will provide some. Oh, there he is.
Sorry, I had something going on in here. I apologize, Council. I know everyone's time is valuable. I was just dealing with something. You're just asking me for a high-level update there, Chief? Well, right now here on Church Road is open for bridge-bound traffic only. So east and west traffic is not open. It's the natural movement of traffic flow on our roadways has to be temporarily reconsidered so that we can protect the access to our public infrastructure, the bridge, given the circumstances that we found ourselves in. The border point's critical to our local economy and our international economy. I think we all know that. So we are taking the steps with our integrated team of police officers from around the country to make sure that we set up an appropriate and safe full reopening of the road. I think we can have it all. We just can't have it all at once right now. And we're working on it so that we don't end up in the same circumstances we were in before. But we are making progress. We are evaluating every hour of every day to see how much better we can do. We arrested over 40 people during the protests. I believe we towed 37 cars related to the demonstration, and we issued numerous tickets. It came to a conclusion that we were happy with, not happy that it happened at all. The response from the Ontario Provincial Police and the rest of our partners was well received by us and allowed us to get a plan of action into play that was reasonable in its timeliness, given the magnitude of the event. So really from that point, we're hoping to build on what we've done so far and get that area set up in a way that there's a system of moving traffic in all directions while we're still protecting the integrity of our border points. Chief, was there anything else you wanted me to touch on?
No, I think that's everything. Thank you. And that's all we have for an update.
Chief and Deputy Chief, thank you very much on behalf of City Council and the entire city. I know the whole team, all of the men and women in uniform that work for the city have been doing a great job over the past 7 days, especially, and all of the resources that were brought here have coordinated very, very well, and we're extremely appreciative for the on-the-ground support that was provided. Members of council, questions of the chief or deputy about this matter? Councillor Bordelin.
Thank you. I too wanted to echo the thank you, not to just the executive, but to everybody involved. And the one question looking forward, understanding that there either could be a repeat incident or there will be potential disruptions, do you have the resources and continued support of either OPP, other forces, or RCMP that will allow for you to deal with any potential either repeats or recidivism as far as protests or anything of that manner that might come back?
I can answer that, Councillor. Thank you for your question. Yes, we have a sustained supplement of resources right now that we feel is going to carry us where we need to go. And if anything emerges outside of what we're dealing with right now, we can make that pivot on pretty short order and make sure that we get our resources in place. Sharing of resources, especially within Ontario, is not unusual for our municipal police services and our provincial police service. It's something that we've done in Windsor too. We've sent sizable amounts of Windsor police officers to places like Toronto during the G20 summit and or things of that nature. So we move very well amongst each other, and we don't really have any concerns about not being able to staff what we need to staff at any given point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Costante.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I too would like to thank the Chief and Deputy Chief and the entire force for all the work, the diligent work this past week, the measured work, and the whole world was watching, and it was a shining example of how to do this in a measured way with as little violence as possible. So I want to thank you. Obviously, as a councillor for the West End, I'm getting a lot of calls right now with the blocking of Huron Church and the traffic flow, and I recognize that the delicate balance that you've mentioned earlier, Deputy, with containment versus slowly reopening. I'm wondering, with respect to emergency services and other flows of traffic, that's still going to be okay, right? There's not going to be any issues there.
Thank you, Councillor. No, we've worked with our EMS and our fire partners and everyone else to make sure that we are able to provide access for those emergency services. I'll tell you from the very beginning, and the Chief is probably going to nod, but the access routes for emergency service to the west end of our city was among our top priorities from the very beginning. So we understand how these services are delivered across our city, and we work with our frontline response partners daily to make sure, especially in these circumstances, that we were not depriving anyone in the city of access to emergency services.
Thank you, Deputy. And both of you emphasized that these are temporary measures. I understand that decisions are being made hour by hour, day by day, this coming week. So I expect that, is it fair to say that the public could expect some changes in the coming hours and days, or is it just so fluid that you can't even give that answer now?
Well, I'll answer that again, Councillor, because I am the Deputy of Operations, and most of it falls on my shoulders. So I'm in the operations center myself personally with this, and our priority is to make sure that we have free flow of traffic, freedom of movement within our city at all spots. So it is a priority, but I would not be doing any favors by giving them some sort of artificial estimate of the time. I understand, especially in your ward, Councillor, that it is critical. But on one side we have a repeated incident in the bridge, and the other side we have free movement, and somewhere within that spectrum we have to find that Goldilocks zone to make sure that we incrementally get where we need to go based on the intelligence we're getting, based on the operations that are facing us, and based on our obligation to make sure that we keep that part open. I mean, one of the big considerations is that people who want to come down and do those types of illegal demonstrations could probably choose not to, and that would change a lot of what we're doing.
Right. Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Sleeman.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to repeat, I think, a couple words brought up. We watch most of it on television, actually, what's going on. I just want to commend our police department. I think Pam and the staff and everyone who worked for the police department, they did a professional job, and my compliment to them. And I know without them, I think would have been probably escalating. And my question, when you start arresting people, did some of them indicate to us or to the police that they're going to be back? They may not, maybe it's threatening, but maybe at least we should be kind of watching for maybe escalation later on in the next few days. I think my question basically go to Jason and Pam, really.
I can take that. Again, that's operations there, Councillor, so I will answer that. And that's something I'm well versed in right now because of where I'm at. Well, I mean, we're dealing with people. Some have a firm ideology about, what their perception is of the government and their freedom of movement in society. That aside, when we arrest them, we charge them criminally, and they get court release conditions if they're being let out of court. And nearly all of them are released, except for I think 2 of them were held in custody out of all the arrests we made. And they get actual court release conditions. They're bound by a court order that they've signed an undertaking that they will not attend, back in the area or participate in that kind of activity in the area. And if so, they can be arrested again. They can be held in custody pending a trial. So there are incremental measures we can take. We also have the power of an injunction that's in place that we received that gives us the authority to arrest people again, for violating a court order that was put in place by the Chief Justice. So we have the tools to be able to deal with that. And recidivism is something that we're all used to. However, in this case, we have a pretty good knowledge of who was there the first time getting arrested. And we are looking and listening to see if people are going to be trying to repeat this behavior or something similar. And I want to make sure that the people know that the Windsor Police is not against activism or people protesting freely or demonstrating what they want to demonstrate in a democratic society. It's the illegal actions that they take that will bring us and conscript the police into action. So I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah. Jason, like I know probably it's not related, but the issues that we have in Ottawa haven't been settled. I just wonder if those people kind of looking at it say, wow, we will be back. And possibly they're looking at other jurisdictions that they don't have as much enforcement as us.
Well, I think the situation in Ottawa is not apples to apples. It's not fair to compare what's going on in Ottawa to what happened here. They're in a very difficult position in Ottawa, and I have a lot of sympathy for the chief of police there and the people that are enduring what's going on there. You're talking about maybe 15% of our society, which is actually a sizable amount of people in Canada. And that's a lot of people who feel a certain way, perhaps more extreme than others as you go through the spectrum of their opinions on their politics. But it is possible that people will come back and do it. And if they come back and do this, then we'll be ready for them and we'll do what we can to protect the city and community safety and respect everybody's rights while we do our job.
Okay. Jason, thank you very much. Thanks, Pam. Your Worship, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Chief and Deputy Chief, for coming out and listening the residents' concerned come to us. I have just a similar concern, like in the case of the next 48 hours, like if they are later on, they come in either even replace the location from Hornchurch, they move it to another. Do we have our sources to tackle both sides of the equation at the same time?
Councillor, I'm sorry. If you could repeat your question. I'm in an active emergency operations center and I have a loud noise. So these aren't noise canceling headphones. If you could just ask that question, unless the chief heard it, I couldn't hear it. Sorry.
My question is in case of the protesters came back, not on the same location, they may choose a different location in the city. Do we have our sources to tackle both sides of the equation at the same time?
Well, these events are a drain on resources. We saw that right away, that they take a sizable amount of our resources away from other strategies in the city, like crime suppression and some of the other services we have, like community services that are very important to the people in the city and they're important to our organization. We have access to the resources to deal with whatever we have to deal with, Councillor. I am confident that the sharing of services amongst police services in Ontario is not going to be a problem for us. I want to commend all the services like the OPP, Waterloo Regional Police, Hamilton Police, London Police, who answered our call for assistance very quickly and very swiftly, and the RCMP as well. And I think we can do it again. Well, I know we can do it again if we have to do it again. And I think really the sweet spot we want to hit right here is to not have to do it again. So we are keeping our ears open. We are using our intelligence avenues, and we're doing everything we can to try and prevent it. But we are a free-moving democratic society, and people are allowed to move between cities, locations, whatever they want freely. And at some point, the police in Canada are expected on a more reactive basis with this type of activity.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And thank you for all you've done during that last week. And so thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kasha.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and good afternoon, Chief and Deputy Chief, and thank you very much. Please pass on my thanks to all the law enforcement involved. The questions that I got repeatedly on the weekend were, how many of these protesters, these people were local? How many were Windsor, Essex County people, and how many were from out of town that are roving protesters? Would you be able to give us an update on that, please?
Well, probably the best, the best answer I can give you, Councillor, is it's a real mixed bag, to use that expression. So we had people who could walk home for lunch and feed their pets and then come back to the protest. And we had people who came from hours away and everything in between. So there are people from Windsor, there are people from the Essex County area, there are people from outside of Essex County and, from far away. So, it's a cause that links many people together from different jurisdictions, and it's not something we're used to. The Windsor Police or this, we're not used to being on the world stage and having to deal with things like this, quite frankly. But it's something that maybe as technology is becoming more global, maybe the demonstration activity is coming more global as well. But that's just something we have to get used to. It's a new reality of policing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good answer. And I know you can only divulge so much, and I appreciate that. Thanks again, Chief and Deputy Chief.
Councillor Francis Geniak. Councillor Geniak.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also want to thank the Chief and Deputy Chief for the service and all of the frontline police officers that were involved. Deputy Chief, I want to underscore in terms of the court releases that were given to the majority of the people who were charged. You indicated that they were told they can't come back. That was part of the release?
Yes, Councillor. Part of their release would have actual specific conditions written on there and a certain perimeter that they can't reattend, which would include both of our border points in the city, or all of our border points in the city of Windsor, quite frankly, not just both of them, but all of them, as well as certain geographical sectors in the city that are linked to the criminal activity. And that allows us to allows us to release them only if they sign an agreement on those court release conditions.
And this in no way, prohibits them from expressing their concerns in the community in appropriate places, correct?
That's correct. We have demonstrators out there today that are following the rules. I'm not sure how many at this point, but there are still some today that are being able to say what they want to say as long as they're following the rules and they're not acting in a manner that's illegal.
And I think that's an important thing to stress. We respect that people do have the right to undertake these, but in the appropriate way, and that police will enforce the law. You can't stand in the middle of any road, correct?
That's right. The illegal activity is not permitted, and by the same token, the police are provided the operational discretion to execute our duties as we see fit in the safest manner possible to the community at those particular times.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Worship. I certainly want to pass on my thanks to the Chief and Deputy Chief and all the police officers that did really great work over the last several days and continue to do the great work. And thank you for keeping the community safe. We certainly appreciate it. Your Worship, I'm just prepared to make a motion at the appropriate time, please.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Francis.
Thank you, Worship. And Your Worship, your Chief of Staff sent us out an email last night to all members of Council regarding some recommendations to provide further directions from Council to administration regarding this matter. And I guess the third paragraph of that motion is no longer needed now, since you stated the direction of a declaration of emergency. So I'll just read out the first two paragraphs and then go from there. that council direct administration to request that the federal and provincial governments partner on a long-term sustainable model, including funding to ensure the security and protection of the international crossings in Windsor, including the Ambassador Bridge, as well as a request for funding of all costs incurred to date by the city related to security and protection measures already undertaken and underway. And further, that council directs administration to review the staffing models, including training programs for city enforcement and security personnel to ensure the city's readiness to manage the potential of ongoing protests.
Okay, it's moved. Is it supported? Supported on the motion. Councillor Geniac, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to administration or to the Chief of Police, who I know did participate in developing a community safety plan. I'm wondering if the international crossings were part of that, and if there are components that address it within the community safety plan.
So thank you, Councillor. I'm not sure if there are some direct components. The plan is about community safety as a whole, but certainly that can be something that the plan can look towards as it moves through its next stages.
And to administration at the city, when does that have to be submitted? I mean, it's a round table of people both here and in the county. So when is the government expecting that we submit that plan?
For you, Your Worship, to the Councillor. Councillor Geniac, my apologies. I just caught the last part of your question. You are referring to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, correct?
That's right.
Okay, so thank you very much. That plan was submitted. The deadline to submit was July of last year. We did ask for an extension, as many other municipalities had, and we did submit it by December 31st of last year. So as Chief Mizuno said, who is one of our co-chairs also, our attention now is turning towards the actual action items that need to be implemented to make this plan now come to fruition.
Were the international borders part of that plan, and how we would address any issue that might come up at those crossings?
They were not that specific, Councillor Geniac. Obviously, with any overarching master plan or framework, we typically don't get into those level of details until we start identifying the action items. So if this is something that council would like us to consider moving forward, we can look at it as part of the next steps.
Well, I certainly think we're a unique community insofar as we have two international crossings. One in particular that is the NAFTA free trade. I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't focused on a little bit more, or that the government wouldn't have, the provincial government wouldn't have requested that in Windsor and Sarnia and any Niagara Falls where those crossings exist. So if administration, maybe the CEO, in terms of any other documents that would apply in particular to international crossings that may be in existence in the city, or do they even exist?
Hi, Your Worship. Councillor Geniac, were you referring that question to me or the police chief? Sorry, I missed it.
To you, Mr. Rayner.
Yeah, there's no agreements that I'm aware of, but certainly the last week has uncovered the necessity for exactly what you're talking about in terms of collaborating across multi-government levels around the protection of those community assets, and something we'll be engaging with the police and our partners over the coming days and weeks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor McKenzie on the motion.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to, I have no questions. I just wanted to articulate my thanks also to Windsor Police. I think the work has been outstanding. but also to all of the stakeholders, in particular our own administration as well, who I know there's a number of folks in the mayor's office and even all of my colleagues here who have been tremendously engaged and concerned about what we're seeing happening play out in our streets and frankly on the world stage. And I think that our community as a whole should be recognized for being able to create the space for protest to be able to be heard and seen, while at the same time protecting the rights of the folks who've been affected by the choices that some of the demonstrators have made with respect to how they want to articulate their views. And I think that we showed the world that there's a way for us to deal with these challenging situations and challenging times. And I think that some of what we've seen today executed by the community and specifically on the front lines by our own police force over the last week has been outstanding and something that I'm quite proud of. So thank you to all who have been, and I'm happy to support this motion moving forward because I think we're taking appropriate steps and learning the lessons that we've just had the opportunity to learn over the last week. So well done on all fronts.
Thank you. On the motion, all in favor? Opposed? And that motion carries. Chief Deputy, thank you very much for being here. We'll let you back to your important business. Thank you very much.